Founded in 1964, Fremont Bank understands the difference 60 years can make. It's the difference between serving a family business and being dedicated to a family business as a family business. The difference between looking at spreadsheets and looking at possibilities. The difference between deposits that go into a vault and deposits that go back into your community. So what difference does 60 years make? All the difference in the world. Fremont Bank. Here for you. Here for good.
So hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Traci Stein, as always. So happy to be here with you. I've got such an interesting episode today. It's the highlights of a longer conversation I had with none other than Nancy Orlen Weber. And if Nancy's name sounds familiar to you, I'm not surprised because she's had a 50-plus year career as a professional psychic detective, helping law enforcement with a range of high-profile and other cases, including ones like the Rachel Domus case, which we will get into further down in the episode. We'll also talk about how Nancy and her students uncannily tapped into the real identity of none other than the son of Sam Killer, which if you were in the New York metropolitan area in the 1970s, or really anywhere in the world, you know that that was on the cover of every newspaper and on everybody's lips for that entire summer. We also talked about other things, though. Nancy was so candid and so generously shared details of her life that have been very impactful and important in shaping both her intuitive development and how her history of traumas and intuitive experiences impacted her worldview and enabled her to work with some of these incredibly difficult cases. So Nancy shares all of that and more. She talks about her recent books she's published. And by the end of the episode, you'll feel like you know Nancy as well. So without further ado, I'm happy to share our conversation with you. I'm so excited to have my guest on today. You will be too. I have followed her work for years and had the opportunity to take some of her classes, but her name is Nancy Orlen Weber.
Hi, Traci.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you for coming.
I'm so pleased and thrilled at what you are doing with your life. Love to see you again. Thank you.
So good to see you too. Nancy, I'm going to give a brief introduction. And then, of course, as I always say, I'm never going to encapsulate your life in the minute that I speak about you, but you're going to share so much about your journey as well that by the end of this episode, I think people are going to feel, honestly, like I felt the first time I saw you on TV, that people feel like they know you. So without further ado, Nancy Orlen Weber is a renowned psychic detective, medical intuitive, and animal communicator with over 50 years of experience helping people and animals through intuitive insight, soul guidance, and energetic healing. Nancy's a former head nurse of an experimental psychiatric unit, and Nancy's journey of overcoming paralysis, abuse, and near death led her to lead a life of service and holistic healing and spiritual development. Nancy's the author of several books. One is The Life of a Psychic Detective. Another is Soul Detective, How to Solve the Inner Mystery of You. And her most recent one is Nature Speaks. So Nancy offers transformational workshops, private sessions, intuitive training programs worldwide. She has worked as a psychic investigator with law enforcement agencies. And Nancy's work has been featured in documentaries and on TV shows, as well as on radio shows and podcasts worldwide. So you've seen Nancy in a variety of media, including on Paranormal Witness, which is a TV show on Sci-Fi, on Psychic Investigators. She's been interviewed on NBC, Court TV, the Biography Channel, ID Discovery, TLC, and many more. There's a lot I would love to cover today, Nancy, but, I'm going to let the spirit move us, as they say. But so good to see you.
Same here, Tracy. This is so much fun being with you because I feel like we know each other.
Absolutely.
So very different than meeting them for the first time.
Absolutely.
Right?
And again, I think it was quite a while. It might be almost 20 years ago that I took a few courses with you at your home. And then I think I did something online with you maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and then had a mini reading with you at a separate time. But honestly, even before I met you, I felt like I knew you. And I think that says something about you. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, Nancy and I spoke about a range of topics. These pertain to her personal development and the development of her spiritual philosophy. In Nancy's writing and in interviews, she has been extremely candid about the traumas she's experienced over the course of her life. And during our conversation, Nancy referred to some of these childhood traumas and feelings of being different, as well as a variety of traumas she experienced in early adulthood and in her first marriage. Nancy began by talking about the impact of these events on her outlook and her personal growth, as well as how these prepared her to do the intense work of tuning into a variety of crimes and criminals and helping law enforcement to solve crimes. So, back to our conversation.
I always think that going through challenges can break us open or close us, right? As a child, I recognized that there was a lot of, I wonder for you and anybody listening, if you saw illusions in terms of why are they lying? Why are the adults making up stories when they said, oh, I didn't ever say that, but they just did, that kind of thing. And then if anyone ever suffered traumas, which is most of us, what I found is when parents or elders of any sort do nothing about that, that sets you up to either close down completely, which I did in part, but also I recognize that why should I pay a price for their problem and their fears? And so the job, and we could take it as a job, is to understand that you can't live in a hypocrisy. You can't believe one thing about we're all connected. Or every living thing comes from the same source, and then not live a life of that. So I made a deal with the universe when I was about, I think I was about 12 or 13, 12, in the schoolyard where I was an outcast, total outcast, right? And I looked at the cliques around and I thought, I don't need to be part of anything. I just need to be as deep as I can. And I thought, what the heck am I saying? I had no clue, but I understood that I didn't want to pretend anything with anybody else. I didn't care that I didn't wear the right clothes or did wear the right clothes or look the right way or didn't. I did go through a stage of that somewhere along the line for about months maybe and thought that's too much work for me.
Nancy, what you're saying, I want to just kind of contextualize this too, because what you're saying about both being open enough and recognizing this larger kind of connection, between every living thing and also being someone who sees things because you were, I'm going to say empathically attuned, not only emotionally, but psychically. Mm-hmm. I feel like what you're saying, other intuitives have said something similar, where it is a balancing act. And a lot of them, I feel like, have a childhood where there is a feeling of otherness. And even if other kids can't put a finger on it, they sense that you sense stuff. And it is a painful journey. Because I think a lot of intuitives have that feeling of like, when am I going to find my tribe or myself? And your most recent book actually is about discovering your purpose, or your second most recent book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both of them came out within 3 months of each other because I'm crazy. I get that. But yeah, it's funny. Dr. Alice Miller wrote in The Drama of the Gifted Child that trauma creates antennas for what comes next, the next moment. So the psychic world, first, I'll give it a little different slant. So when I look at the Greek word that psychic came from, it means soul. And it's a rough translation from Psyche, goddess, and then also from another one, Greek, that I can pronounce, but I can't spell, Shikaiko. And so they call it psychic. They don't call it soul here. And I'm saying, well, why not? If we're alive, dogs have souls, cats have souls, horses have souls, flies have souls, spiders have souls. We all have soul. We're all part of that incredible matrix, that universal algorithm that connects everything. So when we have trauma, particularly with our own species, and there are studies proving that, it's harder to deal with than if you're in a hurricane and survive, if you're in a tsunami and survive, if you can measure trauma. It's harder to recover when your own species turns against you in any way. You could be 2 years old and the people you love are now screaming at you. That's trauma to a 2-year-old. So we think that way. And now that's the inner child work that everybody now knows about, etc. So I think we're all souls. We're all psychic. We could all communicate with everything. I don't see why not. The only thing that inhibits us is our belief systems of walls up on some things, which is why I wrote the book on Soul Detective, because it tells everything, not everything I've been through, but some of the major bumps and all of the exercises I developed on my own to deal with it. So we're all psychic. It just means we point the light in a direction. Well, what direction are you pointing it in, Traci, right now? What do you love doing? You love conversations with others who are also intuitives, also along with you, also with your own gifts. We all are. And it just so happens some of us are meant to do a different job with it than others. A plumber who can walk in and go, I know, I can fix this.
Absolutely.
How do they know it? Even though they may have done 100 or none, some people just get it and trust it based on what?
100%. Nancy, I want to pull some threads out of what you were just mentioning, because not everybody will have yet read your books, but they will after this episode, of course, and with good reason. You're very honest about having experienced a lot of trauma. Also something not uncommon among intuitives. It's not a prerequisite, but I forget the author's name. I was thumbing through this book, The Anomalously Sensitive Person, recently. And one of the things, the research this guy has done, showed a higher than average incidence of having had some sort of childhood trauma, whether it's once or ongoing. You're alluding to ongoing traumas, like, again, having a hypercritical or worse parent, somebody who should be caring for you and, in fact, harms you. You've had a number of traumas in your life that you've been very frank about. Some people feel that kind of cracks something open or makes the intuitive person more intuitive, maybe because of the dissociation that happens. I don't know. Or I've heard other intuitives say, well, it's something about your light. There's something that people sense on a subconscious level, and they're drawn to you, but not in a good way. I don't know if you have any thoughts. I know that's kind of like a tangent to go. We don't even have to go down that road, but.
Oh, I like it.
I'm saying this too, because you're so intuitive and your intuition has led you to be a pivotal figure in solving crimes where other people are traumatized or worse. Right. And tapping into situations that honestly a lot of people could not handle tapping into. So I don't know if we should start with the psychic detective work, or what do you think?
I think I'm going to tell you what my spirit teacher taught me when I was a baby, and then later he was with me till about age 17. Well, sort of. He would come and go afterwards by the time I was about 5, and then 17 once after several years of nothing. So he came back when I was 31, and we worked together for 3 years. He said, I'll be with you for 3 years teaching you how to go direct to source. I said, okay. Why not? Because it could be a delusion. It could be anything. But I knew from psychiatry and psychology, I would test, I would take notes, I would record everything, etc. And I thought, I have no clue who you are, but as long as it's got love, wisdom, kindness, compassion, I'm for it. It's harmless.
Spirit guide, teacher, angel. You're not sure what it is at this point, but you know that it's been with you.
Or a projection.
Or a projection.
I have no clue. I don't care.
Okay.
So, because I don't have proof of anything.
Okay.
If I don't have proof, right? So he said, when I looked at, he said, listen to me. We all have jobs. You have a purpose. We all do. So if you treat it like a purpose, here's the thought. Because I studied on my own, no teachers, tarot. I knew nothing. I didn't look at the book. I just wanted to be able to use my intuition, develop it. And crystals and anything that came my way. Dowsing Society. I knew the people who started it. I had a lot of fun. Faraday cage. I was in for research with Dr. Puharich, who lived 15 minutes from me.
Wow.
And, right? And Marcel Vogel and all the old timers. I was part of that group. I was the newbie on the block, but they loved me and they took me in. They wanted me to lead groups. And it was fun. But he reminded me, tools are outside of you. He said, your job, regardless of what you are asked to do in this world, is not to use outside tools, Nancy. That's your job. Some may use tools and they need to. That's their job. Yours is to always go inside. So the other part of what you were saying and going through, I think of all of it as more understanding at some level deep that there's a disconnect and a wall that people put up when they're hurting, period. When they're frightened, when they're hurt, that's the wall. And I was determined to see my walls and knew it might take me, I didn't care how long it took. My thought when I was about 10 was when I'm 85, and I'm 81 now, so I'm close. So when I'm 85, do I want to look back with regret, shame, guilt? Hell no. I want to look back and go, that was interesting. No judgment. I want memories. I don't want unconsciousness, if you call it that. I wanted my soul wide open. I was determined. I would stare in the mirror in the bathroom, if anybody ever did this when you were a kid, and you could see the facial changes.
Yeah.
And I kept seeing this man. And that was my guide. So when I discovered that, life got much easier. Much easier. So I don't know that it's a disconnect at all. I think it is get rid of the disconnects I find and just, there's nothing to be other than we know what a troubled world we've lived in. So being raped, I know I at one point laughed and I said, you're a soulless person who has no clue that you can touch anything on my form, but you're not touching me. You're an idiot. But I've also worked with hitmen and seen how disconnected they are from their soul. And I think that's more about what it is that we do. And I love that term that you use, the disconnect, right? And I don't want to disconnect. And life got so easy with that.
Not taking on other people's kind of stuff that they are here to work through.
Right. I'm here to work through my stuff, but also to support others working through theirs, but not to do theirs and not to tell them what to do. I can lose people, and I have, who just want me to give them the answer. I don't do that.
Yeah.
It's not my job. My job is proof. Everything's inside you.
Right.
Go.
You know, and it's interesting because you've said so many things that have, been percolating in my brain since you said them. And one early in the episode, you alluded to knowing when other people are not being honest. And I think that is a difficult position to be in our everyday lives. But I think also on a larger scale, to see that the emperor has no clothes. That's
my favorite story ever.
But it's very hard to be the person who knows that something, like people can be brutal if you point it out. You have taken your talent, though, that probably was, it sounds like it was challenging when you were a young person. Again, I think that's a universal experience for intuitives. And you used it to literally help law enforcement catch people who are among the worst of the worst. And I know there's probably a large continuum even in that kind of category. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if, just for the sake of some of the people who are newer to your work, would it be okay if I mention some of the cases?
Sure.
Because not every intuitive, I've had other people on the show. Pam Coronado, you might be familiar with her work. She's also worked with law enforcement to do similar types of work. Mm-hmm. I've taken classes with her. I realize that is not the work I am cut out for. It's just it feels like an assault on my psyche, like to tap into some things. Mm-hmm. But for other people, it's their path. And it sounds like it's been a part, not all, but a part of your path to help solve crimes and help law enforcement. And I was looking at some of your cases because this is how I discovered you many years ago. I live in New Jersey as well. I remember your interview on TV talking about the Rachel Domus case in Long Valley. And you had worked with law enforcement before, but not that police department.
Right.
So another detective that you knew, you reached out to because you started having all this information come to you when a friend of the family came to you and said, this young girl is missing. Is it okay if I set the stage and then have you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. You can say anything you want about it.
Well, you know what it is? It's just, I think it's, there are people out there who don't understand how intuition works, but that it can be extremely specific and that there are all kinds of different uses for this gift. So a young girl, a 14-year-old girl in Long Valley, New Jersey, Rachel Domus, I can't remember if this was in the 1980s or exactly when this was. 80s, 90s, I can't remember.
80s.
Okay. But she was walking home from school and then didn't come home. And the police had picked up someone. They had a suspect briefly in custody. His name was Michael Manfredonia. And I think their own intuition was telling them, it sounds like this is your guy. Something doesn't feel right, but they didn't have the evidence. Contemporaneously, a friend of Rachel Domus' family goes to see you. And before you even see a picture of her, you're getting impressions of what she looks like and of what happened to her, which I won't describe in detail here because I feel like people can look up the case if they want, but it was a violent crime. And she, within hours, probably within a short time of Michael Manfredonia abducting her, she had left her body. She had passed.
Right.
And that is the nicest way I could say it. You picked up on the fact that Michael Manfredonia was a young man, that his name was Michael. And I know there are people who will say, well, it's a common name. Well, but out of the realm of all possible names, you saw what Rachel looked like. You saw what he looked like. You got the name Michael. It was the only name you got. You knew that he smelled like gasoline and that he worked and that his work involved that. And he worked at a gas station, in fact. The police wind up having to let him go because they don't have enough evidence. And this is like gnawing at them. Your friend is like is the chief of police detectives at the time at another.
Yes. Chief of detectives at another
police department. And you reach out because you've got this information, including things you rightfully did not want to share with the family. And your friend is the one who makes the connection. And again, these detectives weren't like, oh, great, we're going to work with a psychic at first. They were open, but not familiar.
No. And no, they wanted to work with me.
Okay. So they were open, even though this was new for them.
The prosecutor.
Okay.
Did not want them to work with me. He even told them that. You're not speaking to Nancy. He was mad at me.
So for reasons that I'm not sure if we can even get into. But,
I don't care.
But I'm sure a lot of prosecutors would not be open to that.
Well,
I don't know.
The sheriff. Okay, so Johnny Fox was sheriff in Morris County at the time. And I had worked with him on a parental abduction of 3 children, found the kids for them, got the first case that became a felony. It was tested as a felony. And so Johnny loved me. He sent me a certificate of achievement and thank you. And would you like a badge? Would you like a gun? I said, get out of here. You're crazy. No, I definitely don't want a gun. So Trumbull comes to him about a case and says to him, that psychic you like, I need you to call her about this case. And Johnny looks at him and says, you don't want the publicity, do you? He said, call her yourself, and walked away and called me and told me about it. And we both laughed. So that was Trumbull, because I had a talk with him in his office after a different case. And I was furious. And so we sat there and he looked at me. He said, I don't want my guys, like there are no females in the police departments, which there were. In fact, the first one we ever had where I lived then is the one who introduced me to the chief of detectives.
Oh.
So, But he looks at me and goes, I don't want my guys to have a shortcut. And just, have somebody tell them the answers. And I looked at him and I said, well, you don't even know what that means. But I'd love for you to tell the families of victims that. Well, have a great day. And he said, here, I'll shake hands. And I just walked out. So that was Lee Trumbull. I don't really care what anybody thinks, his family or what. He was a politician through and through. And on another case, he had an investigator who had never done a homicide in his life work on one of the 3 biggest cases in the state of New Jersey history, and apologized to the family afterwards over that. And I have proof.
So this prosecutor really didn't want you working the case for reasons that sound like there are a few of them, and his own.
Mm-hmm.
But these detectives know in their guts that Michael Manfredonia is the person who has committed this crime, and they've had to send him back home.
Right.
Now
they wanted me.
So if I remember correctly, if I get it wrong, you tell me. But one of the detectives reaches out to you. Mm. This is his first encounter with a psychic. He is blown away because you're able to tell him all these things. You're also able to tell him where Michael Manfredonia is, because now he's been returned home, but he's hiding in the mountains. You can see that Michael Manfredonia can see the police officers from where he's hiding way up in the mountain. Right. That he's by 2 50-gallon gas drums. So super specific. Right. And that they would catch him right away.
Yep.
And that is exactly what happened. They found Rachel Domus. They went to his house. He wasn't there. He had gone into the mountains. By the time this police detective comes to you, you already know how this is unfolding. And you give them information that helps them to catch him.
Right. Yes.
I mean, that's a pretty helpful and important skill set.
If I may.
Yeah, please.
The captain, Gary Miko, was this detective, and the head of that detective unit was George Duker. And George risked his job, and Gary risked his job, because George said, go talk to her. Go do what you want. George and I and his wife and my husband are very close friends. I have introduced George to mediums that he loves and talks with. When he retired, he had another job. He heads up internationally Power Phone for suicidal people. He's an amazing human being. And I asked him when we were filming one of the films on Rachel, because we only did adjudicated cases, and you've got all the details. amazingly so. Woo! For somebody who doesn't want to go there, you went there very well and very beautifully and very gently. I think that was wonderful. What you find with them, too, is the thoughtfulness I find in good law enforcement. The difference between that and the ego enforcement, I'll call it.
Right.
And I am so honored to work with people who serve that way and that well. And they've got all the paperwork. I don't, right? I come away with just doing my part and walking away. I have no idea. In a lot of things I work federally or throughout the country, I don't know the results. I don't care. I just come in, do what I do, and leave. So it's like anything else when we're consultants, right? We do the work, and as you said, not everybody is cut out to live with that. I mean, things of that sort, I always thought, you're right here. Do what you can right here, whatever it is. So I sit in a wheelchair here. I'm not in a wheelchair permanently. I do walk a little bit, but not very well, considering I used to ballet toe and ice skate. It's a little different, but so what? I've had a lot of travel in my life. I've done a lot, and I'm happy. The most part, I have a reference point for everything. So if I'm called in to do something, it's either I get a yes or stay away from it, which I have. I've said no to a lot of things. And when George asked me in a car, we were sitting there because he's an amazing human being, just such a thoughtful person. And we all know, I know by being close to all these people, I'm still friends with some of the crime victim families, still close to them. And I know it can happen anywhere, anytime. And it's why I can handle, because if I'm called to do it. So when George and I are sitting in the car and he asked me about another case, I said, I don't have anything because it wasn't mine to do.
And you felt that?
Oh, absolutely. I said, I got nothing on this. It's a blank wall. And it's wonderful because I've trained myself to only do what I am asked to do by the source of life, period. Nothing else. And it makes it so much easier to live with what I do or what I blurt out at times.
I have to take a quick break, but I'll return in a few moments with more on Unpacking Possibility. Stay tuned.
Founded in 1964, Fremont Bank understands the difference 60 years can make. It's the difference between serving a family business and being dedicated to a family business as a family business. The difference between looking at spreadsheets and looking at possibilities. The difference between deposits that go into a vault and deposits that go back into your community. So what difference does 60 years make? All the difference in the world. Fremont Bank. Here for you. Here for good.
Nancy, I want to ask you something related to a case, one more case. One case you said yes to, so I guess source asked you to do it. And this would not be an easy case either. And it actually ties in your teaching as well, because you had your students meditate. Tell me if I get this wrong, but David Berkowitz, son of Sam. Is that something you're okay talking about?
Oh, sure.
Because, I remember I was a young kid in the 1970s when David Berkowitz, a.k.a. Son of Sam, when nobody knew who Son of Sam was.
Right.
But we were living for a year with my grandparents in Queens because our house in New Jersey wasn't ready. We'd been living in Long Island.
Oh, wow.
So we were in the area. And I remember other young kids talking about, Son of Sam. And I think my neighbor's kid was like, is going to get you, said it to me, but it's just a way of a kid trying to metabolize the terror that this whole large geographic area was experiencing. This is a serial killer and you had a role. You and your students were tapping into who this person was.
Sure. You want to hear what they did?
I do. And I don't remember this. Did anyone approach you to work this case, or is it that you started first by getting information and then related?
Oh, no. So Thursday nights in Peekskill, New York, when I lived there, I had a free-for-all class. I charged $10 and I told them to hide the money so that I have fun finding it. Because I always love games. My son's a game designer now at NYU. So they grew up with me playing games all the time with them. So anyhow, they were very chatty that night. There were about 8, I think.
8 people studying psychic development with you.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of them was brand new. And so they wouldn't stop. I couldn't get them to quiet down, deep breathe, meditate first, and then we look into things. And I said, what is going on? And they said, the Son of Sam. I said, oh, okay. So here's what we're going to do. Join hands. Take a deep breath. I want them to just quiet down, right? And I said, okay, now you're going to just look and make a conversation asking for guidance from above that you only get what you are meant to get about this with love and connection. So I go around the room and 7 of them said, too far. Oh, it was awful. I'm going, okay. And the brand new one says, I get a name, David Berkowitz. And I write it down. And
that's
said,
crazy. That's crazy specific. But right now, the police don't even have that name.
I know. And I got the name Richard David Falco.
Richard David Falco.
Right.
Which was his birth name.
Correct. But we didn't know this. And so they said, call the New York Post, because that's who he was sending letters to. And I said, look, it's 9:30 at night. I've got kids waking up at 6 a.m., 5:30 sometimes, my son. I said, I'll call the New York Post in the morning. They're not going to do anything right now anyhow. And the morning came and David Berkowitz was arrested on a ticket.
Oh, my God.
So the woman who said this was so scared.
This is a new person to this group, not somebody who had been living as a practicing psychic.
Right. And by the next week or so, it was found that his birth name was Richard David Falco. And so when we met again, everyone's amazed, etc. And she came back and she hired me to go see her home, etc., because it was a home with history. And I said, there's another home underneath.
So this is your student's home. She invites you over. She's living in a place and you feel like there's another foundation or something underneath her actual home. Okay. So interesting.
Well, this is all Revolutionary War area. So, and it turned out it was. Anyhow, so they were all, what is it and how? I said, listen, when you have no preconception and you're not afraid of anything, you're just filled with love. Nothing can harm you. And you get what you're meant to get, period. I was meant to get his birth name because here's a new person. And they chose to give it to her. For her to know anybody can do this anywhere, anytime. You just have to do it with love. You cannot do it by pushing or forcing or emotions or anything else. Just one thing. Love is your connection. And it's your connection. And if you accept that, then you'll get what you're meant to get, not a single thing more or less. And that's why I laugh a lot. And I said to you, I can be pretty goofy.
But you have to have a good sense of humor, because if you're also tapping into, and I feel like a lot of people don't realize that everybody's psychic abilities will manifest somewhat differently. So not everybody's doing the same thing. Obviously, you know that. But for people who are newer to this, like some people are like, well, why can't everybody get the lotto numbers? I mean, some people probably do, but you're open to getting the thing that your soul is meant to get. That is part of your purpose here. But you've got to keep yourself sane by not being stuck in the weight of that, because it's weighty stuff.
Good point. Excellent point. Thank you. Right. And I found that when I was starting it, working with the police particularly, I would go out Thursday nights with my group to a place called Mount Olivet that had live music on Thursday nights. And after meditation, you're dancing, you're moving, you're burning it off. We're just playing. And a lot of times when I worked for a full day with the police, sometimes I would come back Not look at my kids, just make sure they were okay. Say, see you in 15 minutes. I'd go take a shower, put on very feminine clothes and cook dinner and do a lot of grounding activities. And I found that was really important. When we don't choose, it chooses us. And then we don't know, we don't feel we're in control. And years ago, I was raised by a mom who loved gambling. Not big, because they didn't have any money, and she wasn't a gambler. She was careful. But she would bet $2, and she loved horse racing. And she took me once, and I had 10 out of 10. I was giving her, and she was so happy she came home with maybe $40.
Wow.
And that was a lot of money in those days. And so I grew up knowing about gambling and games. And I lived in Vegas for I don't know how many weeks, and I won at roulette every single night. They changed dealers on me or whatever. And I didn't have a lot of money, and I refused to bet big. But I had enough to pay for my motel because I was going cross country. I was I lived in my car for 6 months, didn't care, or motels. But I also cleaned motel rooms because I wanted to see how clean they really were. I hung signs because I wanted to see how you do that. I had a lot of fun. That was my sabbatical from nursing.
You're a free spirit.
Yeah. And I also knew that it was noisy and smoky, and I got tired of all of it. And so I stayed there maybe a month or so and went, oh, so boring. And I've been asked to gamble with others knowing how I can. And I've turned down everything. Wealthy people would come and say, how much do you want? 100,000, 200,000? I'll go with you. And I go, don't ever ask me again, please. I don't like it. I don't want to hear the noise. I'm not interested. I'd rather see a show. So when you don't know, it feels like a lightning bolt and you don't think you have any control over it. And you don't have a path of a conscious choice of there is a better purpose. And so I find that you learn how to control what you can. This is an instrument we're given, Make the best of it. Play music with it.
Yeah, and it sounds also like after doing more intense work, your way of recentering and keeping yourself sane and healthy is to go into what feels more like you. Like you said, putting on clothing you liked and cooking dinner for your family and getting outside maybe because, and I think this is something a lot of people don't realize, if you don't have good self-care, you can wind up stuck in other people's energy or take it home.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds like you pretty naturally developed your way of like good psychic hygiene.
Oh, I love that term. That's beautiful.
I made that
psychic hygiene. Yeah. I've never heard it before. Well, I didn't hear everything before, but I love that. That's so smart.
Maybe that's a good segue into the next part of what I'd love to talk with you about though, because, of course, you're very well known for your psychic detective work, but you have also shifted a lot of your focus to healing, healing with essential oils, focusing on eating well. You do energy healing formally?
Okay. So the easiest way to explain is I've been asked, I don't see it on your website. Do you do remote viewing? I said, 4-year-olds do remote viewing. The world does remote viewing. I don't care what you call it. I don't have labels. So others have labeled. I was a medical intuitive when I was a young nurse. And before that, I could see.
Talk about that, Nancy, because I find that really interesting and important.
Okay. So for me, when we see things off kilter in others, and something came across, and I don't remember how I found it in an early book when I was a kid, but I read a lot of biographies when I was 6, 7, 8, that the Greek called it the body-mind, that it was one. And I went, oh, that makes total sense. You can't separate it. And when I felt things were off kilter in somebody, I knew that they weren't well. And I didn't know how it would be expressed always, but I could see some who were dying or would be dead and when, and others would come to me and tell me goodbye. And one friend died at 13, but I knew a year before that he did not have a cold. He was going to be dead next summer. And
it was not just, but it was a knowing. Just
total
like
knowing.
I know
Right.
without knowing how I know, but I just know it.
Well, I believe that the man I spoke with from a crib on
The spirit
told me.
guide, the spirit teacher.
I called him the man for
Okay.
a long time
Okay.
until I found out who he was. Then I argued with him. So, and purposely, I think I set it up so that I don't take any of me too seriously. And so that, to me, some people call it medical medium, medical intuitive, whatever. And I don't care. It just came naturally. And then when I wanted to tune in, I could, which is why when I became a 19-year-old nurse, I wanted psychiatry. I wanted to work in psychiatry, but then I saw they did electric shock and they did drugs. And I said, man, are they archaic. They're like the medieval dark ages.
Because would this have been in about the 1970s?
No, 60s.
60s? Okay.
I graduated in 1963
Okay.
nursing. I was 18, a month before my 19th birthday.
Things were really intense then.
It was crazy.
It wouldn't feel that helpful necessarily to be on one of these units where you have very sick people.
It hadn't been. Well, not only that, in the history of the insane asylum, I saw that up through the 1930s and 40s, women, 95% of it, were women thrown in by their husbands.
Yeah.
For depression, or they wouldn't do what they told them.
Right.
Oh, man, was I livid. Whew. It was like, try me. Just try me.
It's true, though.
But I couldn't find any place I would ever agree to work until I was almost done with nursing because I had been disabled by my first husband, etc. And it cost me. And by a patient before that. Doesn't matter. So I looked around, and then one day I worked at the old Lincoln Hospital in the ICU, and I loved it. So I can remember a woman who was thrown from the third floor or second floor by her ex-husband. Her 2-year-old was in the room watching. So the police came, took the 2-year-old. She came in with ruptures and broken bones all over the place. And every Sunday she was rushed in for surgery. After, I think it was 3 or 4 months she was with me, she never had one bed sore. She never had one infection. She never had any of those. She healed. We had teamwork. Anytime I needed, I would hit that button and everyone would come running. Right? She walked in a year later to thank everybody for saving her life. And I love her. I still think of her and go, I love that woman and her baby. Her baby knows how much we loved her and how much we cared about her. That to me is what we're all about. I said, I want to be a nurse, hands-on. And so they made me the head nurse. Her health and hospitals had to okay it. They then offered me any education I wanted up through PhD for free. I said, nope, not interested. And I discovered there the most beautiful people in the world. That team was unbelievably amazing. And when they could see that I could see through a hallucination, tell them what it is in minutes, break through and have that person crying with me and hugging me and walking with me, a catatonic for 20 years, speaking in 5 minutes. That door opened up so wide for me that they offered me the top post with the psychiatrist director of New York State Psychiatry. He offered it. I taught the residents in psychiatry with him. I never opened up a book. That's when I knew what I had and how important it could be to people who were suffering like crazy, right? And so all of that synthesized so beautifully there. So when I left, I was free to find anything and carry, even though there was tremendous stress, some people would think. I was told I was sterile, couldn't have another kid. I had the other kid. While I was home doing nothing, my husband, at 9 months pregnant, he lost his work, sat on a couch for a year. No money coming in, brand new little house. I was fine. I didn't care. I figured I would always find a way. By then, I was not who I used to be. That job, acute psychiatric unit, was the best blessing I had ever had in my life. It was amazing. Psychiatrists applauded what I did, but the patients taught me that it's a fracture that can occur through poor diet.
A fracture in their mental health.
Everything,
Okay.
body, mind.
Body, mind.
Parasites, the brain. I've read the books, Your Brain on Parasite. Yeah, go read.
That doesn't
Traci's
sound
face is so beautiful. She's gorgeous normally, and then she made that.
You're too kind. Yeah, so for people who are only listening, I'm making a grimace because the idea of parasites anywhere is kind of creepy.
Most people have them.
Yeah, it's something that's hard to think about.
I know. I've done a lot of parasite cleansing in my time,
Ooh.
and it's okay.
But Nancy, when you were working with patients, I'm going to bring it back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
Because you talked about a plumber who can intuitively sense what's going on and get a problem solved faster than somebody else.
Absolutely.
And that makes sense. I've used that analogy with like a mechanic who finds out what's wrong with your car when nobody else can. I absolutely think in the health professions, 100%, there are people, whether or not they would call it intuition.
Yep.
Their intuition helps them to figure out when a medication actually is not the right medication for somebody, or there's something going on that was missed, or if something.
Look at the TV series that are coming out now. They're all about stop putting people in a box, right? Watson. And there's so many others I can't think of now, but there are a whole bunch of them coming out and saying, it's a mystery. Stop assuming. So we had a physician at Albert Einstein, because Lincoln Hospital is part of the complex from Albert Einstein. And I forget where I was there, but there was a doctor that we said was 95% accurate just walking in and looking at the patient. He could just feel it, and he knew it. So they might call it gut hunch. They may, we now know gut brain. They talk to each other. The instinct for survival is strong if the bacteria in the gut work right and they're the right ones, right? And so we all get that feel, whether you walk in a room and there are a bunch of people. Why do you feel more comfortable with one than the other? What's going on? Same wavelength, so-called, or frequency? Like-minded, maybe. Or maybe, we don't know. Kind of funny. There was a little nonverbal 4-year-old. And some things are FDA non-compliant, so I have to be very careful how I speak on this one.
Yeah.
And he was in my home with his mom, who was a naturopath. And so he'd been nonverbal, I guess, for about 2-3 years. Adorable little boy, sweet, good, but nonverbal. And I said, you have a pendulum? She said, yeah. I said, okay, I want you to just put this right on his body. I can't say what.
Okay.
Just a tiny, tiny drop of something. I said, but find out where. I'm not going to tell you. But because all of a sudden my parotid gland started swelling. And I thought, the golf balls, his virus is talking to my virus and activating it. How the heck could that happen? And so she went home and did that. She found an area over his spine with the pendulum and put the drop on. Next morning, she's driving, and she's a chatty Cathy. She hasn't stopped talking ever at times. And so her son's in the back, and she's going to pick up their daughter from preschool. And she's and all of a sudden she hears this little pipsqueak in the back go, Mommy, would you please stop talking so much? You'd never give anyone a chance to talk. And he never shut up after that. And and she called immediately. I got goosebumps, and he's been fine ever since. So for me, medical intuitive is just an easy terminology to say. And when I teach it, I also suggest, I always, say, listen, a little bit of knowledge doesn't hurt. A little fundamental in biology, anatomy. When I work on horses, I see energy. You mentioned healing energy. I make it up. I've always made it up. I didn't have money for classes. I didn't have money for anything. I made all my kids' clothes. I had ground my own grain because somebody gave me a Vitamix. Thank you. And et cetera. I didn't have, but I also never spent money on classes because that would be an extravagance for me back then. And it was for many years that way. My medical debt was $250,000 in 1965.
Oh my God.
So you can imagine, right? I've had 37 hospitalizations by the time I was 28. So I recognized that I thrived, but I wasn't looking to do anything. The doors just kept opening and I would walk in because I believed that no one breaks my own trust of me being me. No one. I learned that one the hard way, yes, but I think everybody does. I don't think anybody learns it by being comfortable. We have to get out of that wish that everything was just so nice and happy all the time. I don't want to be happy all the time. It doesn't inspire me always. I write poems. I've written 12 songs with somebody. It's registered in BMI. I have fun, but a lot of that also came from things. I labeled one Storm Winds at Her Door is the name of a song I made. But it was a poem about what I was going through, and I carry my magic for the ninth star. I am for the storm winds at the door. I wrote it, and I went, yeah, I like that. So I think we have to be willing to point our light in a direction and stop thinking so much about the dark.
It's really hard sometimes. We are going through a time that is
crazy.
I'm going to be thoughtful as I say this, but people will know what I mean. This time reminds me of other times in history, and I'm not the only one to think that. And it's alarming, but for our souls have chosen to come and live through this experience.
Well, okay. I want them to go to their own edge. And do you know you're at your own edge? And when you do, take a look in the mirror. Don't look at the other. Don't look at who you idolize, because that's crazy. There's a cover of a book I saw. I never read the book, but the cover I love because I knew what the book was about. It's called, If You See the Buddha on the Street, Kill Him or Shoot Him, something like that. And it's no idol worshiping.
Yeah.
None. Don't put anybody above you or below you. It's so simple. And when people finally get that, that's why we laugh out loud. That's why it's easy to lift ourselves up when we recognize that why are you comparing yourself to anybody ever? Ever. I mean, it's a pointless exercise. It's futile. It gets you nowhere except to beat yourself up a little bit. It's all the hidden stuff that you talked about early on. The childhood, the traumas, and how we address that. So we always have that wheel, that opportunity when it triggers again. We have that opportunity. Instead of just calling it a trigger, it's also an opportunity for change, for transformation.
Oh, absolutely. Nancy, you mentioned working with a horse briefly a few minutes ago, and I wanted to come back to the animal intuitive work or the animal connection. I'm assuming I know the answer to this, not even psychically, just logically, because I think animal people are always, they'll tell you they've always been animal people, but you always felt a strong connection to animals?
So I didn't have animals growing up. And my first roommate had a cat, Irving, and I fell in love with Irving. Aww. Irving was wonderful. And it was the first time I could get close to an animal. And I've had animals ever since. Briefly, I didn't when I was in my car and when I lived single and worked all the time. And then I did have a cat, and I've had rescue animals ever since, every kind, and love them.
Nancy, I want to be mindful of your time. So I want to just get your website where people can find out about your books, find out more about you, find out about your courses and private readings. What is the best website for people to go to?
My name,
Nancy.
NancyOrlenWeber.com.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you.
And so I'll post that in the show notes. But Nancy, I just wanted to thank you again for making the time to speak with me today. You know, you're such a caring human being, and you've really worked your whole life to try and make things better for others. You know, and we need more wonderful and caring and thoughtful people in the world. So I want to just say that I appreciate you, and I appreciate your taking the time to do this.
Oh, Traci, it is so delightful to also have your thoughtfulness show. It's fascinating. Psychic hygiene, I will.
You can steal that.
Well, more than steal, it's more a vision, right? Being clairvoyant and loving art as I do and painting. It's the vision you created that's so beautiful coming from you. So it fits.
Thank you.
It fits you.
Thank you.
So thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Traci.
Oh, thank you again. This has been another episode of Unpacking Possibility. If you enjoyed the episode, please do remember to like, share, follow, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. And of course, as always, until next time, be well.